Good morning and welcome to Mission Control Houston. We are live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Texas. You are currently seeing a live view inside this International Space Station Flight Control Room. Here in Mission Control Houston, the Orbit 1 flight control team is currently on console in support of today's hatch close and undock operations for the Axiom Mission 4 crew, and this Orbit 1 team is being led by Flight Director Allison Bollinger, who goes by the call sign Athena Flight. Today, we will be providing live coverage of hatch close operations for the Dragon Grace spacecraft, which is currently docked to the space-facing port of the space station's Harmony module. Grace will be returning the Axiom Mission 4 crew back to Earth later today following an 18-day stay aboard the orbiting laboratory. During this time, the crew has been conducting a mission comprised of microgravity research, educational outreach, and commercial activities. Undocking today is scheduled for 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern, with a splashdown off the coast of California about 22 and a half hours later on Tuesday, July 15th at 4:31 a.m. Central, 5:31 a.m. Eastern. Teams recently conducted another weather briefing ahead of today's departure activities, and weather at the splashdown sites continues to look good to support today's undocking. And the Axiom Mission 4 crew on board station is currently working through procedures to don or put on their spacesuits in preparation for hatch close and undock later today. Again, as the crew works through these procedures, they are being supported by the joint NASA Axiom Space and SpaceX flight control teams on the ground. We are expecting a final crew ingress to take place today around 3:55 a.m. Central, about 20 minutes from now, 4:55 a.m. Eastern. And on board station alongside the departing Axiom Mission 4 crew is Expedition 73. As part of that expedition crew, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers will be supporting today's hatch close operations, and then NASA astronaut Anne McClain will also be on tap to monitor Dragon's undock and departure. Following final ingress of the crew in about 20 minutes or so, shortly after that step, both the Dragon hatch and the APAS hatch on station will be closed, and then depressurization of the vestibule will begin. The vestibule is the area between the Dragon hatch and the APAS hatch, which prior to Dragon Grace's docking on Thursday, June 26, was exposed to the vacuum of space. The process to depressurize the vestibule and bring the area back down to vacuum will take about an hour following hatch closure and preparation for Dragon's undock and departure. Again, we are expecting undocking to take place about 2.5 hours from now at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. The Axiom Mission 4 crew includes Peggy Woodson, former NASA astronaut and director of human spaceflight at Axiom Space, who is serving as the mission's commander, alongside ISRO, or Indian Space Research Organization astronaut and pilot for the mission, Shubhanshu Shukla. And then the two mission specialists are ESA, or European Space Agency project astronaut Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski of Poland, and HUNOR, or Hungarian to orbit astronaut Tibor Kapu of Hungary. The SpaceX Dragon spacecraft carrying the Axiom Mission 4 crew lifted off atop a Falcon 9 rocket at 1:31 a.m. Central.
And cargo.
Houston Station, go ahead for cargo.
Hey, Peggy. Wanted to say great work. Cargo and CG look good. We have no further actions for you.
Copy. Thank you.
And there you just heard some communication between the capsule communicator on the ground here in Mission Control Houston, or CAPCOM, as he spoke with AX4 Commander Peggy Whitson as they completed some cargo operations. Those operations were completed just a few minutes ago, but they've been completing cargo packing and stowing inside Dragon for the past few days in preparation for today's departure. Again, the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft carrying the Axiom Mission 4 crew lifted off atop a Falcon 9 rocket at 1:31 a.m. Central, 2:21 a.m. Eastern, Wednesday, June 25th, from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And then following a 28-hour journey, the crew docked to the space-facing port of the International Space Station's Harmony module at 5:31 a.m. Central, 6:31 a.m. Eastern on Thursday, June 26th. Shortly after docking, the Axiom Mission 4 crew was welcomed aboard the space station by the Expedition 73 crew. And Expedition 73 includes NASA astronauts Nicole Ayers, Ann McClain, and Johnny Kim, as well as JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, astronaut Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmos cosmonauts Kirill Peskov, Sergei Ryzhikov, and Alexei Zubritsky. Since their arrival on June 26th, the Axiom Mission 4 crew has been busy conducting over 60 different scientific experiments, as well as participating in many outreach events and commercial activities. Unique to Axiom Mission 4, there was a joint collaboration between NASA and the Indian Space Agency for this mission, and the space agencies participated in 5 joint science investigations, as well as 2 in-orbit STEM demonstrations during the crew's stay aboard station. And there on your screen, you can see a recap of the Axiom Mission 4 docking to the space station that took place 18 days ago on June 26th. Similar to the docking and arrival of the crew a couple of weeks ago, today's departure will be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew. Ahead of the planned undocking at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern, there will be a final go, no-go poll about 15 minutes beforehand, around 5:50 a.m. Central, 6:50 a.m. Eastern. And this final go, no-go poll is where the joint SpaceX and NASA teams make their final call for Dragon to depart the space station. Again, this is one of many checkpoints in the return that will continue all the way up until just before the deorbit burn, and it allows mission managers multiple chances to assess the weather at the splashdown zones and make sure everything is lining up before Dragon departs. Again, we heard not that long ago that the weather continues to look good at the splashdown zones for a splashdown tomorrow, July 15th, to continue on our way to undock the Dragon Grace spacecraft. And there on your screen, you're seeing a live look from the International Space Station, the camera pointing towards the hatch of the Dragon spacecraft. And there going into Dragon is Axiom Mission 4 pilot Shubhanshu Shukla. In the next 15 minutes or so, we should see all 4 crew members make their way inside the Dragon spacecraft and get situated in their seats. We see 2 of the 4 there now, and the other 2 are continuing to work through the procedures to don or put on their launch and entry suits. And there on your screen now, you can see Axiom Mission for Mission Specialist Sławosz Uznański-Wisniewski. And closest to the camera there is the other Axiom Mission 4 mission specialist, Tibor Kapu. So the two that are seated and already in their suits are Axiom Mission 4 pilot Shubhanshu Shukla, and then next to him is the Axiom Mission 4 commander, Peggy Woodson. And the crew will remain in those spacesuits through today's undocking and departure activities. And then following undocking and departure, and once Dragon is safely outside the approach ellipsoid, which is one of several safety zones set up to govern spacecraft arriving and departing the space station, the crew will be able to doff or remove their suits and settle in for the ride home. Again, that will be an approximately 22.5-hour journey before they're splashdown tomorrow morning, July 15th, and the crew will then put their suits back on prior to deorbit and entry.
Still station on 2 for EDTA blood tubes.
With you on 2.
Good morning. There is the leftover blood tubes, unused, 6 of them, labeled Ax blood, 10 mil EDTA. Do you have a stowage location for those? I wasn't sure if they were trash, if we're stowing them with us, or should if I float up and get them with Axiom?
And we are checking for a location.
Okay, thank you.
For those of you who are just joining us, you are currently seeing a live look inside the Dragon Grace spacecraft.
Back with you on 2. Those can be trashed in the current hardware JSB.
Happy trash, thanks.
You're currently seeing a live look inside the Dragon Grace spacecraft as the Axiom Mission 4 crew prepares for their departure from the International Space Station later today. And we are awaiting final crew ingress. 2 of the crew members already have their spacesuits on, and 2 of them are currently working through those procedures. After that is complete, we should have that final ingress followed by hatch closing, after which the process to depressurize the area between the Dragon hatch and the APAS hatch on station will begin. And then this will set us up for an undocking later today, currently planned for 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. Ahead of today's departure, the Axiom Mission 4 crew and the Expedition 73 crew aboard the space station took a few minutes to share some parting words during a farewell ceremony yesterday, July 13th. With that, let's go ahead and take a quick look at what the space station commander, Takuya Onishi, and Axiom Mission 4 commander, Peggy Woodson, had to say.
Okay, so on the behalf of entire Expedition 73 crew, I would like to say a couple of words. So Peggy, TB, Shuks, and Swav, we really enjoyed your company, and thank you so much for bringing a lot of joy, excitement, inspiration, and other positive ways to make our experience here even better. And your dedication to science and your professionalism definitely marked a new standard for the private astronaut missions. And we hope that you guys enjoyed your time being here. And we also hope that the time you spent here will become unforgettable moments in your lives. So thank you so much. And now I will hand the microphone to Axiom 4 Commander Peggy Whitson.
Thanks, Tak. And we really enjoyed ourselves up here. It was an amazing experience. It's always great to work with a bunch of professionals, which you are, but it's even more special to work with folks that have become our friends even more deeply. And we really appreciate the fact that the camaraderie and the teaching that you guys offered to the crew was really exceptional. And we thank you.
2 and 1302. Did you mean 5102 and 1301?
Houston, maybe. It's been an early morning, and yes, I juxtaposed those two numbers.
Okay, copy. Thank you. And finally, for 1001, we would like that actually in the EMER CTB 5511 in Node 2 Deck 2. And that's for the ammonia response medical kit.
Okay, copy. I will put the ammonia monster response medical kit in 5511, the 1.0 CTBs into the pantry if they're empty, and the 2 halves stay where they're at.
That's a good config. Thank you.
And there you just heard. And there you just Capcom or Capsule Communicator here in Mission Control Houston and NASA astronaut Anne McLean aboard the space station. With today's undocking and departure, the Axiom Mission 4 crew with a splashdown tomorrow, July 15th, will have spent 20 days in space with 18 days docked to the space station. And AX4 Commander Peggy Whitson will have spent 695 total days in space across 5 flights, which will put her at the 7th on the all-time list for cumulative days in space. Since AX4's arrival on Thursday, June 26th, the station has had 11 occupants.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2 for any available crew and Node 2 camera. Hey, it looks like the Node 2 camera came unplugged. Can we have someone check the cable for that? Thank you.
Again, some additional comms there between the team on the ground and the crew aboard the space station, working to do some configuration of one of the internal space station cameras.
Houston Station, we reseated the cable, so hopefully that will help.
Again, since Axiom Mission's for arrival on Thursday, June 26th.
At Houston Station for PMA3 stowage, 5136 is the Dragon Zenith IMV duct CTV, so it's currently empty, but it won't be here in a minute after Vapor does her activity, so I will leave that one in PMA3.
Copy, thank you. And for the camera, we saw it come back online briefly and then go back off.
Happy. We're working the connector again.
So the station has had 11 occupants since the docking on June 26th, and then following today's departure activities, the station occupancy will go back down to 7 crew members we typically see on board. But this won't last for too long, so coming up later this month, Crew 11, comprised of NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, along with JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Kimiya Yui and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov will launch to the International Space Station, currently targeted no earlier than Thursday, July 31st. And once docked, the station population will again increase to 11 people for just a few days before Crew 10, comprised of NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, return home to complete their mission. And there on your screen, you can see the crew portrait for Crew 11. Again, there on your screen, you're seeing a live look inside the Dragon Grace spacecraft. This was the first flight of the Dragon Grace spacecraft. So following launch and orbital insertion of Axiom Mission 4, Peggy Whitson unveiled the new name of the Dragon spacecraft as Grace.
And SpaceX Dragon on the big loop contact from C2.
Peggy, I have you loud and clear on the big loop.
And you just heard some conversation there about configuring the big loop. The big loop is a central communications loop for all teams supporting the operational activities today. So it's one central.
Dragon Houston on Space to Ground 2. Heads up, we are still in hardline audio config. Stand by for big loop audio config.
Dragon copy.
So it's one central loop that the International Space Station Flight Control Team, the SpaceX Flight Control Team in Hawthorne, California, as well as the International Space Station and the Dragon crew can communicate on during the undocking and departure activities. So the teams are currently working to configure that big loop and get it into a operational configuration to depart.
Go ahead on 2.
Yep, the hatch seal for the Dragon forward hatch has quite a bit of dust on it, so we're going to use the vacuum cleaner and clean it real quick. Just wanted to keep you guys up to date.
Copy, thank you.
And you just heard some additional communication as they work to prepare for today's hatch closing operations. Again, we are expecting hatch closing to take place in the next 15-20 minutes or so. The crew continuing to work through procedures to don or put on their spacesuits. And then once that takes place and all 4 Axiom Mission 4 crew members are seated, that hatch close will begin to take place, and that includes both the hatch on the Dragon side as well as the APAS hatch on the space station side. And NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers is on top aboard space station to assist with the Dragon and space station hatch close operations today. And then for undocking, NASA astronaut Anne McClain will be on top to monitor that from the space station. We are now about 2 hours and 10 minutes away from a planned undocking later today at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. Ahead of this planned undocking, there will be a final go/no-go poll at 5:50 a.m. Central, 6:50 a.m. Eastern. Again, this final go, no go is where the joint SpaceX and NASA teams make their final call for Dragon to depart the space station today.
Okay, Dragon. Dragon cabin configured for departure complete, step 2.9.
And you just heard some comms between Axiom Mission 4 Commander Peggy Woodson and the Core, or the Crew Operations Resource Engineer in Hawthorne, California. The Core is similar to the Capcom and Mission Control Houston. They serve as the voice link between the Dragon crew. Again, after the final go, no go poll later today, teams will then send the undock command to actually begin the undocking sequence, and that undock command is scheduled to be sent.
Dragon Houston on the Big Loop for a comm check. Big Loop audio configuration complete. Also initiate a comm check with SpaceX.
And SpaceX in Houston and station, this is ComTech from the Dragon on the Big Loop.
Houston reads you loud and clear.
SpaceX also reads you loud and clear on the Big Loop.
And station has you loud and clear on the Big Loop.
Big comm check, and as we found the additional FOD that was missing when we took the photograph, it's back in bag 201 in volume 11. So that's the LIO FOD. We took photographs of the HEPA filter FOD and sent that down to you on the station. We'll have to get the other later.
And Peggy, I copied additional LIO FOD placed in bag 201 on the Big Loop.
Good copy.
And we just heard some confirmation and some comms checks there for the Big Loop. Again, that Big Loop is a central communications loop for these integrated operations today that has the SpaceX teams, the NASA teams, as well as the space station crew and the Axiom Mission 4 crew in Dragon, all configured onto one communications loop. So again, after the final go, no-go poll later today, teams will then send the undock command to actually begin the undocking sequence. That undock command is scheduled to be sent at 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern. Following this command, the umbilicals will begin to retract, and Dragon will then begin to release the 12 hard capture hooks that are currently keeping Dragon attached to the space station, and those hooks will be released in 2 sets of 6. That entire sequence takes about 4.5 minutes to complete, and from there, Dragon will execute 2 short thruster firings called undock burns to physically separate Dragon from the space station. Again, we expect that physical separation to take place at around 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern later today. The next departure milestone after physical separation is depart burn 0, which is the first of 4 departure burns to begin moving Dragon further away from station. Depart burn 0 will be followed by the second departure burn about 5 minutes later and help move the spacecraft beyond the keep-out sphere. And the keep-out sphere is an invisible 200-meter line centered on the space station, and it is one of several safety zones set up to govern a spacecraft.
Dragon. SpaceX on the big loop, you are go to complete LIO configuration, IMV teardown, and hatch closure per NASA procedure 2.103. When complete, execute instructions in your hatch closed event details, and then complete suit donning per procedure 4.010. For the LIO cartridge, we will be swapping to cartridge 4.
And Dragon copies, we are go for step 3, LIO cartridge 4, and once we finish those steps, after reporting in, we will continue on the event details.
Again, we're continuing to hear some communications between the core or the crew operations resource engineer at the SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California, and Axiom Mission for Commander Peggy Woodson as teams continue to work through today's hatch close operations in advance of the undocking later today. We did hear that they are go to proceed with those hatch close operations, and they're also working through some LiO or lithium hydroxide configuration. Those canisters work to scrub carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So again, continuing to work through the hatch close preparations in advance of today's undocking. That undock is scheduled for about 2 hours from now, with that physical separation planned to take place around 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. After that physical separation, Dragon will execute depart burn 0, and then after that will be the second departure burn about 5 minutes later, which will move Dragon beyond the keep-out sphere. The keep-out sphere is an invisible 200-meter line centered on the space station, and it is one of several safety zones set up to govern spacecraft arriving and departing from the space station. Before moving into the keep-out sphere during arrival, spacecraft have to be configured to where they would not cross that imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft lost all maneuvering. After Dragon exits the keep-out sphere, the next milestone will take place about 13 minutes afterwards, and that is when Dragon will exit the approach ellipsoid. And the approach ellipsoid is another imaginary shape similar to the keep-out sphere, but this time it's a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. One of the key differences with the approach ellipsoid is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory, which means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, even if it lost all maneuvering. And then once the spacecraft exits the approach ellipsoid, joint operations will end, and responsibility for the spacecraft and crew.
Station on 2 for IVA closeout.
Go ahead on 2.
Yeah, if it looks like they're working step 3 of 2.103, I just want to make sure that I'm go to start coordinating with them for the procedure.
A-firm, you are a go. Also, Vapor, it looks like you may have bumped the camera in node 2 on your way out. If you would please check the cable.
And those comms there were between the capsule communicator Capcom here in Mission Control Houston and NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers aboard the International Space Station. Ayers is currently working through the Dragon departure preparation procedures, and will continue that all the way through hatch close.
And he said, no problem. Just for awareness, that Node 2 Cam 1, I think this is one of the newer cables, so it might be on the camera side that the issue is. So it's one of those connectors that kind of, you go in, you do it a corner turn, and there's a little kind of, I don't even know what to call it, but little piece of metal that kind of goes into the track and then locks the connector in. When it locks the connector in, the connector pulls out slightly. So our trick is to kind of undo the connector to where it kind of goes over the part that pulls the connector in tighter. I hope that's making sense. And so what happens if we kick it, it actually fully connects the cable and locks it in as it's supposed to be, but that actually disconnects the video feed.
Okay, we copy. Thank you for telling us about that.
Yes, I can hear it in your voice. It made no sense whatsoever. But hopefully somebody from Photo TV knows what I'm talking about.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Someone down here understands.
Does anyone out there understand me?
Yes, we understand. LIO is installed at 9:04, and the hatch is going closed now. I'll call you when it's complete.
And Peggy, I copy 904 for LIO cartridge install, hatch closure in progress.
And we just heard confirmation there that the Axiom Mission 4 crew has finished those procedures to swap out the lithium hydroxide.
Dragon, hatch is closed, indicator is closed.
We copy, hatch closed and indicator aligned.
And we just have confirmation that the Dragon hatch is now closed at 4:07 a.m. Central, 5:07 a.m. Eastern, to set Dragon and the Axiom Mission 4 crew up for a departure later today. Again, that undock is planned for a little under 2 hours from now at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. Following undock and departure, the crew has a 22.5-hour journey ahead of them in preparation for a splashdown off the coast of California tomorrow, July 15th. And you're continuing to see a live look inside the Dragon Grace spacecraft with all 4 Axiom Mission 4 crew members currently on board. On the center of your screen are pilot Shubhanshu Shukla and Commander Peggy Whitson. And then closest to the screen is Tibor Kapu, who's currently working through procedures to get his spacesuit on and prepared for today's undocking activities. And then on the far side of the screen is Sławosz Uznański-Wisniewski, also working through those procedures to get his spacesuit on.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, control of cabin air temperature via 4.080 is allowed until pre-chill. Note that the hex is currently configured for maximum cooling.
Dragon copies on temperature control. Thanks.
For those of you who are just joining us, we're continuing to bring you live coverage of hatch close operations. Again, we had the hatch closed between Dragon and the space station at 4:07 a.m. Central, 5:07 a.m. Eastern. This took place.
SpaceX Dragon PPRV is confirmed open.
And SpaceX copies, PPRV confirmed open.
This hatch close took place ahead of a planned undocking later today at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. Now the crew is continuing to don or put on their spacesuits in preparation for today's departure activities. They will also conduct some suit leak checks, and depressurization of the vestibule will take place. That vestibule is the area between the hatch on Dragon and the APAS hatch on station that prior to the crew's undocking on docking on June 26th was exposed to the vacuum of space. Following that docking, it was pressurized to meet to the pressure of the space station, which is around 14.7 psi or pounds per square inch. Now that the hatches are closed, that depressurization process will begin, and it takes about an hour to complete, bringing that area of the vestibule all the way back down to vacuum. So again, ahead of a undocking later today, about an hour and 50 minutes from now at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern, teams will conduct a final go, no-go poll. And this is the final opportunity for the joint SpaceX and NASA teams to make their determination for Dragon to depart station. After that poll, teams will then send the undock command to actually begin the undocking sequence. That undock command is scheduled to be sent at 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern. Following that command, these umbilicals from Dragon are attached to space station to provide data telemetry while Dragon is docked to the space station. So those umbilicals will begin to retract, and then Dragon will begin to release the 12 hard capture hooks in 2 sets of 6. And that entire sequence takes about 4.5 minutes to complete. Afterwards, Dragon will execute 2 short thruster firings called undock burns to physically separate Dragon from the space station. Again, we expect that physical separation to take place at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. After Dragon physically separates from the space station, it will execute what is known as Depart Burn 0, which is the first of 4 departure burns to begin moving Dragon further away from the space station. This burn will be followed by the second departure burn about 5 minutes later to help move the spacecraft beyond the keep-out sphere. The keep-out sphere is an invisible 200-meter line centered on the space station, and it is one of several safety zones set up to govern spacecraft arriving and departing from the space station. Before moving into the keep-out sphere, spacecraft have to be configured where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft lost all maneuvering. After Dragon exits the keep-out sphere, about 13 minutes later, Dragon will then exit the approach ellipsoid, and the approach ellipsoid is another imaginary shape similar to the keep-out sphere, but this time it's a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. One of the key differences with the approach ellipsoid is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory, which means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, even if it lost all maneuvering. After the spacecraft crosses the approach ellipsoid, joint operations will end and responsibility for the spacecraft will be handed back to the SpaceX Flight Control Team in Hawthorne, California. Again, just like its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure in deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board. Following today's departure, this will set Dragon and the Axiom Mission 4 crew up for a splashdown off the coast of California tomorrow, July 15th, around 4:31 a.m. Central, 5:31 a.m. Eastern.
In SpaceX Dragon, all 4 crew members are suited. Seats 1 and 4 are still in work to get seated.
And I copy. All 4 crew members are now suited. Seat 4 is going to get seated soon.
And we just heard confirmation that all 4 Axiom Mission 4 crew members have been suited up in preparation for today's departure. And we'll take one final look live at Dragon Grace as we prepare to conclude our hatch close coverage this morning. On your screen there, you can see pilot Shubhanshu Shukla. Next to him is Peggy Whitson.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground has verified system reconfigurations for hatch closure are complete and nominal.
Next to Peggy is Sławosz Uznański-Wisniewski, who is talking with Tibor Kapu there on your screen. Again, the hatch between Dragon and the International Space Station was recently closed at 4:07 a.m. Central, 5:07 a.m. Eastern, with all 4 Axiom Mission 4 crew members safely inside and getting prepared for their departure from the International Space Station. We will resume coverage with SpaceX and Axiom Space later today at 5:45 a.m. Central, 6:45 a.m. Eastern for a planned undocking at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. We hope that you'll tune in then, but for now, this is Mission Control Houston.